The massive alien ships appeared above Earth without warning on a Tuesday morning. There were 12 of them, each one larger than any city humanity had ever built. They hung in the sky like silent mountains, their surfaces gleaming with colors that human eyes had never seen before. People across the world stopped what they were doing and stared upward. Some prayed. Some celebrated. Most just waited to see what would happen next. Chancellor Dayho stood in the command center of Sol Station Alpha, the enormous orbital platform that served as Earth's government headquarters. He was a tall man in his 50s with gray streaking through his black hair. His hands were clasped behind his back as he watched the alien vessels through the observation window. Around him, officers and advisors rushed back and forth, their voices rising in controlled panic. Captain Hyun-woo commanded the UES Defender, humanity's largest warship. He received orders to approach the alien fleet carefully and establish communication. His ship felt like a toy boat next to the alien vessels. When they finally made contact, the aliens responded immediately. They wanted to talk. They wanted to come aboard his ship. The alien ambassador called himself Vriltok. He stood nearly 3 meters tall on 6 legs that clicked against the metal floor of the Defender's meeting room. His body was covered in chitinous plates that shifted between blue and green depending on the light. 4 arms extended from his torso, and his head featured multiple eyes arranged in a ring around his skull. When he spoke, a device on his chest translated his words into perfect Korean. Vriltok explained that he represented the Galactic Council, a government that included 847 different alien species. They had been watching humanity for decades, waiting for humans to develop faster than light travel. Now that humanity had achieved this milestone, it was time to join the greater galactic community. He made it sound like an honor. He made it sound inevitable. Captain Hyun-woo listened carefully and recorded everything. He asked Vriltok what joining the council would mean for humanity. The alien ambassador produced a data device that contained the terms of integration. The device was small, no larger than a human thumb, but it contained thousands of pages of agreements, laws, and requirements. The terms were transported immediately to Sol Station Alpha, where teams of lawyers, scientists, and government officials began studying them. What they found made Chancellor Dayho's expression grow darker with each passing hour. Commander Ji-won headed Earth's Deep Space Intelligence Division. She was a sharp woman in her early 40s who had spent 20 years analyzing threats to humanity. She delivered her assessment to the Chancellor after 48 hours of continuous work. The Council's terms were not an invitation to join as equals. They were terms of surrender dressed up in diplomatic language. Humanity would have to share all technology with the Council immediately. Human expansion into space would be limited to specific zones determined by Council authorities. Every human being would need to be genetically cataloged and registered in Council databases. Human laws would become secondary to Council regulations. Earth would be required to host Council observers, who could veto any government decision deemed harmful to galactic stability. In the meeting room, Chancellor Dayho sat with his top advisors. General Tae-sung argued that humanity had no choice but to accept. The Council had thousands of ships and controlled most of the galaxy. Refusing them would mean war, and humanity would lose. Dr. Young-ja, the chief physicist, disagreed. She pointed out that the Council's own documents revealed they had strict laws against conquering species that achieved FTL travel independently. It was considered barbaric among their member species. The debate continued for another full day. Captain Hyun-woo kept the alien ambassador comfortable aboard the Defender, making excuses about the complexity of human government processes. Vriltok seemed patient at first, but as the hours stretched on, his translated voice took on a sharper edge. He reminded the captain that no species had ever refused Council membership before. It simply wasn't done. On the 3rd day, Chancellor Dayho made his decision. He asked for a direct communication channel with the Council's main headquarters. Vriltok arranged it eagerly, clearly expecting humanity's acceptance. The alien leadership appeared on screens, throughout the Council chambers on their distant capital, world of Centros Prime. Thousands of different species watched and waited to welcome the newest members of their civilization. Chancellor Dayho stood alone before the camera. He wore the formal uniform of Earth's government, simple and dignified. Behind him, the curve of Earth was visible through the station windows. He looked directly into the camera and spoke in a calm, clear voice that was simultaneously translated into hundreds of alien languages. "We have carefully reviewed the Galactic Council's terms of integration," he said. "After thorough consideration and consultation with our people, Earth's unified government has reached a decision." He paused for just a moment. "We decline your offer. Thank you for your time." The transmission ended. The silence that followed was absolute. Aboard the Defender, Vriltok's body went completely still. His multiple eyes all focused on Captain Hyunwoo, who stood with his arms crossed, his face showing no emotion. The alien ambassador's translator device struggled to convey his response, switching between several different emotional tones before settling on something close to disbelief. "You cannot simply decline," Vriltok said. "This is not how first contact proceeds. Species negotiate. They discuss. They seek compromise. They do not just say no." Captain Hyunwoo shrugged slightly. "We just did," he replied. Back on Centros Prime, chaos erupted in the council chambers. Representatives from hundreds of species began shouting over each other. Some demanded immediate military action. Others called for economic sanctions. A few suggested that perhaps humanity didn't understand what they were refusing. Maybe the translation had been faulty. Maybe humans were too primitive to grasp the concept of galactic governance. But as recordings of Chancellor Daeho's statement spread through council networks, it became clear that humanity understood perfectly. The human leader had been articulate and direct. There was no confusion, no misunderstanding, just refusal. In 12,000 years of expansion and integration, the Galactic Council had never encountered this situation. Their protocols had no provisions for simple rejection. They had procedures for military conquest, for negotiating with aggressive species, for handling technological primitives who didn't understand what was being offered. But they had no procedure for a species that understood completely and still said no. The panic was beginning to set in. If humanity could refuse, what would stop other species from questioning their own membership? What if the Council's authority was not as absolute as they had always believed? These humans had only been in space for a few decades, had only 12 colony systems, and possessed military technology that was laughably primitive by Council standards. Yet they had looked at the greatest power in the galaxy and said no. The question racing through every Council mind was the same. What did humanity know that the Council didn't? What were these humans planning? And most terrifying of all, what would they do next? The Council chambers on Centros Prime buzzed with angry voices for 3 straight days after humanity's rejection. Ambassador Vriltok stood before the assembled representatives, his chitinous plates now a dull gray color that indicated deep stress among his species. He had never failed a diplomatic mission before. The shame of it weighed on all 6 of his shoulders. The debate among council members went in circles. Some species argued that humanity needed more time to understand what they were giving up. Others insisted that the humans were bluffing and would cave under pressure. A particularly aggressive reptilian species called for immediate invasion, but they were quickly shouted down by the majority. The council had laws. They couldn't simply attack a species that had achieved faster-than-light travel on their own. It would make them no better than the ancient conquerors from the dark ages of galactic history. Finally, after much arguing, the council reached a decision. They would impose a complete blockade around human space. No ships in or out, no trade, no communication. Humanity would be isolated until they came to their senses and accepted the Council's generous terms. Admiral Thexelon, a veteran commander from the Keltor species, received orders to deploy 300 warships around all 12 human star systems. Admiral Thexelon was a creature of pure logic. His species had no emotions in the way humans understood them. They made decisions based on mathematics and probability. As he positioned his fleet around human territory, he calculated that the blockade would break human resistance in approximately 43 days. That was how long human food reserves would last according to Council intelligence reports. The blockade took effect on a Monday morning, Earth Standard Time. Human cargo ships that had been traveling between colonies suddenly found themselves facing alien warships at every jump point. The alien vessels didn't fire. They simply blocked the way and sent messages telling human captains to return to their points of origin. Humanity was now cut off from the rest of the galaxy. Commander Jiwon watched it all happen from her office on Sol Station Alpha. Her screens showed the positions of every council ship. They had humanity completely surrounded. Any normal civilization would be panicking right now. Food supplies between colonies would run short. Medical supplies couldn't be transported. The economy would start collapsing within weeks. But Commander G1 wasn't worried. She had been planning for this exact scenario since the moment they had started reviewing the Council's terms. She picked up her communicator and sent a single message to Chancellor Deho. "Phase 2 is beginning," she said simply. Across human space, something strange started happening. Or rather, nothing happened. There was no panic, no emergency government broadcasts, no citizens demanding that their leaders negotiate with the aliens. People just went about their business as if nothing had changed. On Mars colony, Dr. Bora continued her research on exotic matter manipulation. Her laboratory sat deep underground, where the red planet's thin atmosphere didn't interfere with her experiments. When her assistant asked if they should prepare for food rationing, she laughed and told him to check the agricultural reports. Mars had been overproducing food for 6 months. They had enough stored to last 3 years. The same pattern repeated across all 12 human systems. Every colony had quietly built up massive reserves of food, medicine, and essential supplies. The public hadn't noticed because it had been done slowly and carefully. A little extra production here, slightly larger warehouses there. Now humanity sat comfortable behind the blockade, while the Council fleet waited for signs of desperation that never came. Weeks passed. Admiral Thexulon recalculated his projections. 43 days came and went. Human colonies showed no signs of distress. His intelligence officers hacked into human communication networks expecting to find messages about shortages and rationing. Instead, they found cooking shows, sports broadcasts, and entertainment programs. Humans were acting like the blockade didn't exist. Back on Centros Prime, Ambassador Vriltok faced increasingly hostile questions from Council leadership. Why wasn't the blockade working? What were the humans doing? How could such a young species be so well prepared? He had no good answers. His understanding of human psychology was clearly insufficient. Junior diplomat Tae Sung became Earth's only regular contact with the Council. He was a young man in his 20s who seemed completely unbothered by the crisis. Every day, Council representatives would contact him demanding updates on when humanity would reconsider its position. Every day, Tae Sung would smile politely and say, "Our position has not changed." Then he would disconnect the call and go get lunch. The Council's frustration grew with each passing week. Some species began questioning the wisdom of the blockade. It was expensive to maintain 300 warships in a holding pattern. Crews were getting bored. Resources were being wasted. And humanity didn't seem to care at all. 2 months into the blockade, Council intelligence operatives finally managed to break through human network security. They expected to find the real situation, the hidden panic, the secret plans to surrender, the desperate leadership meetings. What they found instead confused them even more. Humans were preparing for something, but not for surrender. Agricultural production had tripled across all colonies. Industrial facilities had shifted their output to strange new projects. Engineers were working overtime on construction initiatives that Council analysts couldn't identify. Every human seemed to be working toward some common goal, but intelligence couldn't determine what that goal was. One intercepted message between 2 human engineers stood out. "How long until the arcs are ready?" one asked. "Another 8 months," the other replied. "Make it 6 if you can," the first engineer said. "I want to be gone before they figure out what we're building." Arcs? The Council analysts debated what this could mean. Were humans building some kind of weapon? A fleet to break the blockade? New colonies and hidden systems? The uncertainty was maddening. On Earth, Engineer Min Seo stood in the massive construction bay that had been carved into the dark side of the moon. Before her stretched the skeleton of the largest ship humanity had ever attempted to build. It was 10 kilometers long and 3 kilometers wide, and it was just one of dozens being constructed in secret locations across human space. These weren't warships. They were arc ships, generation vessels designed to travel beyond the boundaries of known space. Each one could carry millions of people in suspended animation, along with everything needed to establish new colonies in unexplored regions of the galaxy. Humanity wasn't preparing to fight the Council. They were preparing to leave. Chancellor Deho made a private visit to the lunar construction site. He walked along the observation platform, looking at the enormous vessel taking shape. Mincio joined him, wiping grease from her hands. "Can we really do this?" he asked quietly.
Can we just leave?
Mincio nodded. "The galaxy is bigger than the Council realizes. There's unexplored space beyond the rim. If we push past the boundaries they've mapped, we'll be free to build our own future." The Chancellor was silent for a long moment. "It's a huge risk. We'll be giving up everything familiar, heading into complete unknown." "Yes," Mincio agreed. "But isn't that better than surrendering our freedom? Our children's freedom? Their children's freedom?" She gestured at the Ark ship. "This is our answer to the Council. We don't need their permission to exist. We'll make our own way." Back in orbit around Centros Prime, the Council leadership was finally beginning to understand their mistake. Humanity wasn't going to break. Humans weren't like other species. They didn't calculate odds and make rational decisions about survival versus freedom. They made emotional choices based on principles that seemed illogical to most galactic species. The panic that had started as confusion was now becoming real fear. If humanity actually left known space rather than submit to Council authority, it would prove that the Council's power had limits. Other species might start getting ideas. The carefully maintained order of galactic civilization could start to crack. Ambassador Vriltok received new orders. Stop the blockade, open negotiations, offer better terms, do whatever was necessary to make humanity stay. But as he prepared to contact Earth again, he wondered if it was already too late. The humans had been very quiet these past months. What had they been doing with all that time? The morning the Council's long-range sensors detected the launches, Admiral Thexulan experienced something his species rarely felt: surprise. Across all 12 human systems, massive objects were emerging from hidden construction facilities. They were ships, but unlike any vessels in the Council's databases. Each one was enormous, designed more like mobile cities than traditional spacecraft. On the moon's dark side, Engineer Mincio watched through the observation window as the first Ark ship powered up its drives. The vessel she had spent 8 months building was finally ready. Around her, other engineers cheered and embraced. They had done the impossible. They had built humanity's ticket to freedom. The Ark ship designated Nomad's Hope was the flagship of the Exodus fleet. Captain Shung-ho stood on its bridge, a space so vast it could have housed a football field. His crew numbered 50,000 people, including families, children, scientists, farmers, teachers, and dreamers. In the cargo holds below, frozen embryos of every Earth species were stored alongside seeds from every plant humanity had ever cultivated. If they never found their way back to human space, they would carry Earth's legacy with them into the unknown. Ambassador Vriltok's multiple eyes went wide as he studied the sensor data. 47 Ark ships, each capable of carrying millions in suspended animation, destination coordinates pointing toward completely unexplored space beyond the galactic rim. The humans weren't preparing to negotiate. They weren't building weapons. They were leaving. The Council chambers erupted in chaos when the news arrived. Representatives from hundreds of species shouted over each other. This couldn't be happening. Species didn't just leave. They negotiated. They compromised. They joined the Council, or they were conquered. Those were the only two options that had ever existed. But humanity was creating a third option. They were walking away from the entire galactic civilization. Professor Jae Hyun, humanity's leading expert on alien cultures, appeared on every communication channel in Council space. He was an older man with kind eyes and gray hair, someone who looked like everyone's favorite teacher. His message was brief but perfectly calculated to cause maximum impact among the Council species. "The galaxy is not big enough for both freedom and your Council," he said calmly. "We choose freedom. We will find our own space, build our own worlds, and live by our own rules. Perhaps in a few thousand years, if you have learned to respect other species' right to self-determination, our descendants might meet again as friends. Until then, goodbye," the message ended. Professor Jae-hyun had not asked for permission to broadcast. He had not sought Council approval. He had simply stated humanity's position and cut the connection. It was the most insulting thing anyone had done to the Council in its entire history. On Centros Prime, the Morpheus Collective, a species that existed as a hive mind dedicated to economic calculation, presented their analysis to the Council leadership. Their projections were terrifying. If humanity successfully established colonies beyond Council space, They would seed hundreds of worlds with human ideals of independence. In 1,000 years, those colonies would number in the thousands. In 10,000 years, the galaxy could be surrounded by human-descended civilizations that owed no allegiance to anyone. Even worse, the Morpheus Collective calculated that other species would see humanity's success and begin questioning their own council membership. The economic model that had sustained galactic civilization for 12 millennia would collapse. The council's power was built on the idea that membership was inevitable and universal. Humanity was proving that neither was true. Emergency sessions were called. For the first time in recorded history, the council held meetings every single day for a week straight. The debate was fierce. Some species argued for military action to stop the Ark fleet before it could escape. Others insisted that would only make things worse, proving humanity right about council tyranny. A third faction argued for complete reversal of their position. Offer humanity everything they wanted. Full autonomy, no restrictions, favorable trade agreements. Do whatever was necessary to make them stay. The problem was that this faction couldn't explain why humanity would believe such offers after everything that had happened. Ambassador Vriltok volunteered to try one last diplomatic mission. He traveled to Sol Station Alpha and requested a personal meeting with Chancellor Deho. To everyone's surprise, the human leader agreed. The meeting was scheduled for the following day. Vriltok arrived with no guards, no assistants, no recording devices. Just himself and a translator. Chancellor Deho met him in a simple conference room with windows overlooking Earth. The planet looked peaceful from orbit, white clouds swirling over blue oceans. Please, Vriltok said, his translator struggling to convey the emotion in his voice. Stay, we were wrong. We can offer full independence. Complete autonomy. You can govern yourselves entirely. Just remain within the council's boundaries. Don't leave known space. Chancellor Deho poured 2 cups of tea, offering one to the alien ambassador. Vriltok's species didn't drink tea, but he accepted it as a gesture of respect. You don't understand, the Chancellor said quietly. This isn't about the specific terms you're offering. It's about what you tried to do. You approached us as if we had no choice, as if our freedom was something you could grant or take away based on your convenience. Vriltok's body shifted to a deep purple color. We have maintained galactic peace for 12,000 years. The Council's structure works. It prevents wars, ensures prosperity, advances technology. Why would you give that up? Because it's not our structure, Deho replied. You built a system without our input and then expected us to accept it without question. You never asked what we wanted. You never considered that we might have different values, different priorities. You just assumed we would be grateful for the opportunity to join. The Chancellor stood and walked to the window. Do you know what humans value most? Choice. The ability to make our own decisions even if they're wrong, even if they're hard, even if they lead to failure. We would rather fail on our own terms than succeed on someone else's. Vriltok was silent for a long moment. Finally he spoke. You had your chance for peace, for security, for a place in the greatest civilization the galaxy has ever known, and you're giving it all up to fly into the unknown toward worlds that might not even exist. Chancellor Deho smiled slightly. Yes, we are. I don't understand you, Vriltok said. I know, the Chancellor replied. That's why this meeting is over. The meeting had lasted 4 minutes. Ambassador Vriltok left Sol Station Alpha knowing he had failed completely. There would be no last-minute compromise. No dramatic reversal. Humanity was leaving and nothing the Council could say would stop them. Across human space, families boarded the Ark ships. Young Mother Haywan carried her daughter onto Nomad's Hope, walking through corridors that would be her home for the next several years. Her daughter asked if they would ever see Earth again. Haywan didn't know, so she told the truth. Maybe not, but we'll see new worlds, better worlds, worlds where we make the rules. Dr. Youngja, the chief physicist, supervised the loading of humanity's most advanced research onto the Ark-designated New Dawn. Experimental drives, quantum computers, genetic databases, artificial intelligence cores. Everything that made humanity technologically dangerous to the Council was being taken far away where Council laws couldn't touch it. Captain Xiang Ho received final authorization from Earth Command. The countdown began. In 72 hours, the first wave of Ark ships would activate their experimental long-range drives and push beyond the boundaries of explored space. 200 million humans were going into the unknown, Another 800 million would follow in later waves over the next 5 years. The Council's sensor networks watched helplessly as humanity prepared for the greatest exodus in galactic history. And the worst part, the truly terrifying part, was that 3 other species were now openly discussing whether they should leave too. The Tillari, the Vornesh, and the Quilix Federation were all having internal debates about independence. Humanity's rejection was becoming contagious. The galaxy would never be the same. The emergency council session was held in complete secrecy. Only the highest-ranking representatives from each major species were allowed to attend. What they discussed was something the council had never seriously considered before: military action against a species that had achieved faster-than-light travel independently. Military Coordinator Kralix presented the tactical analysis. He was a being made entirely of crystalline structures that glowed different colors as he spoke. His species had no concept of mercy, only efficiency. The math was simple: 300 Council warships versus 47 human Ark ships. The Ark ships were massive but lightly armed. They were designed for travel, not combat. The Council fleet could destroy them all within hours. The debate was fierce. Half the Council argued this was necessary to maintain order. If humanity escaped and thrived beyond the rim, it would undermine everything the Council represented. Other species would follow. Galactic civilization would fragment into chaos. Better to stop it now, even if it meant violating their own laws about conquering FTL species. The other half warned that destroying the Ark fleet would make humanity into martyrs. Species across the galaxy were already questioning Council authority. An unprovoked attack on fleeing refugees would confirm everyone's worst fears about Council tyranny. It could trigger rebellions across hundreds of worlds. After 2 days of argument, the vote was called. The result was narrow but clear. The Council authorized Admiral Thexulan to intercept and destroy the human Exodus fleet. He was given 48 hours to complete the mission before the decision could be reversed by public pressure. Admiral Thexulan received his orders with no emotional response. His species didn't question. They calculated and acted. He immediately repositioned his 300 warships to intercept the human Ark fleet at the edge of Council space. His calculations showed the humans would reach that boundary in 36 hours. He would be waiting. On Earth, Commander G1 watched the Council fleet movements on her tactical displays. She had expected this. Humans understood fear better than most species. Fear made people dangerous. The Council was afraid, so they were going to lash out. She picked up her communicator and sent a single coded message to Dr. Youngjia. "Time for the insurance policy," she said. Dr. Youngjia sat in her laboratory on Sol Station Alpha, surrounded by quantum communication equipment that represented 10 years of secret research, humanity's greatest scientific achievement, developed in hidden facilities across 12 star systems. The Council knew humans had made progress in quantum physics, but they had no idea how far that progress had gone. The quantum entanglement network was active. 17 probe devices, each no larger than a briefcase, positioned at key locations throughout Council space. They had been smuggled into position over the past year by human traders and spies. Each probe was connected through quantum entanglement to a master control system on Sol Station Alpha. When activated, they could broadcast information simultaneously to every corner of the galaxy. 24 hours before the Council fleet would intercept the Ark ships, every communication screen in galactic civilization suddenly lit up. The broadcast overrode all other signals. It appeared on government channels, civilian networks, military frequencies, and private communications. There was no way to block it or shut it down. Dr. Youngjia's face appeared on billions of screens across 800 worlds. She looked calm and professional, like a teacher about to explain a simple concept. Behind her, data streams and technical diagrams were visible. "Greetings to all species of the Galactic Council," she began. "My name is Dr. Youngjia, and I represent humanity's scientific community. We are broadcasting this message to inform you of a technological advancement we have achieved. We have solved quantum entanglement communication and developed a galaxy-wide instant communication network." She paused, letting that sink in. Quantum entanglement communication was considered theoretically impossible by Council science. Several species had tried for thousands of years without success. As a demonstration of this technology, Dr. Youngjia continued, We have positioned 17 quantum broadcast probes throughout Council space. These probes are now active and cannot be shut down or destroyed without triggering their automatic broadcast protocols. If the Council fleet attacks our Exodus ships, these probes will immediately transmit all of humanity's technological research to every species in the galaxy. New data began scrolling across screens behind her. Advanced propulsion systems, genetic enhancement techniques, artificial intelligence architectures, energy generation methods, medical breakthroughs, decades of human scientific achievement all documented and ready to be shared. But that's not all, Dr. Youngjaw said, her expression becoming more serious. Along with our technology, we will broadcast detailed evidence of the Council's activities over the past 1,000 years. We will share records of species that were conquered and forced into membership. We will reveal the technological suppression programs designed to keep member species dependent on Council infrastructure. We will expose the economic exploitation systems that benefit the founding species at the expense of newer members. The data streams changed, showing classified Council documents that humanity had acquired through years of espionage, treaties that were enforced through coercion, military actions disguised as peacekeeping missions, economic policies that systematically disadvantage smaller species. The choice is yours, Council leadership, Dr. Youngjaw concluded. Allow our Ark fleet to depart peacefully, and this information remains secret. Attack us, and every species in the galaxy will know the truth about your so-called benevolent government. We are not bluffing. We are not negotiating. We are simply informing you of the consequences of your actions. You have 24 hours to decide. The broadcast ended. Silence fell across the Council chambers on Centros Prime. Admiral Thexulon, positioning his fleet for the intercept, received urgent messages from Council leadership. Hold position. Do not engage. Await further orders. For the first time in his career, he was confused. The tactical situation was clear. The mission parameters were defined. But suddenly the mission was suspended. On the bridge of Nomad's Hope, Captain Sung Ho watched the countdown timer. 18 hours until they crossed into unexplored space. His sensor officer reported that the Council fleet was holding position at the boundary, but not advancing. Not retreating either, just waiting. They're trying to decide if we're bluffing, the sensor officer said. Captain Seung Ho shook his head. We're not bluffing. The question is whether they're smart enough to realize that. The next 12 hours were the longest in galactic history. Council leadership tried desperately to locate the quantum probes, but humanity had hidden them too well. They tried to hack the quantum network, but the encryption was unbreakable. They tried to calculate whether humanity would really follow through with the threat, but human psychology was too alien for their models. Then, 8 hours before the Ark fleet would reach the boundary, something unexpected happened. 3 species simultaneously announced their intention to leave the Council. The Talari, a species of peaceful aquatic beings, declared they were tired of Council policies that favored land-dwelling species. The Vornesh, a crystalline civilization, stated they had been considering independence for decades, and humanity's courage inspired them to act. The Quillix Federation, a coalition of insect species, announced they were forming their own alliance based on voluntary membership rather than Council coercion. The Talari ambassador delivered a message that was broadcast across her entire home world. Humanity has shown us that the Council's power is not absolute. They have shown us that freedom is worth risking everything. We are not as brave as humans, but we are brave enough to say no to a system that has exploited us for 2,000 years. We are leaving the Council, effective immediately. Council chambers descended into complete chaos. Representatives shouted at each other in hundreds of languages. Alliance blocks that had stood for millennia began fracturing. Species that had been silent members for thousands of years suddenly found their voices. The entire structure of galactic government was collapsing in real time. Ambassador Vriltok stood alone in an observation room, watching the chaos through a window. His life's work was falling apart. The diplomatic service he had dedicated 300 years to was crumbling, and it was all because of one species that refused to follow the rules. Admiral Thexulon received his final orders. Stand down. Allow the human fleet to pass. Do not engage under any circumstances. The Council could not risk triggering the quantum broadcast. The political cost was too high. Lieutenant Sunhee, communications officer aboard Nomad's Hope, received a transmission from the Council fleet. It was brief and formal. You are cleared to proceed. The Council will not interfere with your departure. This transmission acknowledges humanity's permanent separation from Council space. Any future contact will be considered an act of invasion. Safe travels. Captain Xiong-ho allowed himself a small smile. They had won. Not through superior weapons or military might. They had won through determination, clever planning, and the willingness to risk everything for freedom. It was the most human victory imaginable. The ARC ships activated their long-range drives and pushed forward toward the boundary of explored space. Behind them, the Council fleet simply watched them go. And behind the fleet, the Galactic Council struggled to hold together a civilization that was rapidly coming apart at the seams. The boundary between explored and unexplored space was marked only on maps. There was no physical barrier, no sign or warning beacon. But as Nomad's hope crossed that invisible line, every human aboard felt something change. They were leaving behind everything humanity had ever known. The safety of charted stars. The familiar constellations that had guided their ancestors. The galaxy they had been born into. Captain Sung-ho stood on the bridge and watched the last known star system disappear from their sensors. Ahead lay darkness punctuated by distant points of light that no human eyes had ever studied. His navigation officer, a young woman named Ji-sun, had plotted a course toward a promising stellar cluster 14,000 light-years away. The journey would take 2 generations even with humanity's advanced faster-than-light drives. All ships reporting successful transition, his first officer announced. 47 ARC ships, all systems green. We're officially beyond Council space. A cheer went up across the bridge. People embraced, laughed, and some cried. They had done it. Against the most powerful government in the galaxy, humanity had chosen freedom and won. But Lieutenant Sun-hee, the communications officer, wasn't celebrating. She was recording the moment carefully for the historical archives. Future generations would want to know exactly what it felt like when humanity took its first steps into true independence. She captured the cheers, the tears, the look of exhausted relief on Captain Xiong-ho's face. Back on Seoul Station Alpha, Chancellor Dae-ho received reports of the successful crossing. He was in his private office, alone except for Commander Ji-won. They sat in comfortable silence for a long moment, watching Earth rotate slowly below them. "Do you think they'll make it?" Ji-won asked quietly. Dae-ho nodded slowly. "They're humans. They'll figure it out. We always do, and if they don't, then at least they died free." The Council tried to maintain control, but the damage was done. The Talari departure became official within days. Their homeworld ceased all communication with Council authorities and established their own independent government. The Vornesh followed suit, taking 17 colony systems with them. The Quilix Federation didn't just leave. They published their own version of Dr. Youngja's documents, adding evidence of Council abuses that even humanity hadn't known about. Within 6 months, 43 species had either left the Council or were in active rebellion. The galactic government that had stood for 12,000 years was fracturing into dozens of smaller alliances and independent civilizations. Some of these new governments were genuinely democratic, others were not. But all of them shared one thing in common. They existed because humanity had proven that the Council's authority was not absolute. Engineer Ha-jun, who had remained on Earth rather than joining the Exodus, continued his work in secret. The 17 quantum probes were still active, still broadcasting updated information to anyone who wanted to listen. Every new human technological advancement, every piece of research, every innovation was shared freely with the galaxy. It was humanity's gift and its insurance policy. If the galaxy progressed together, there would be less temptation for any one power to try conquering the others. 5 years into the journey, the ARC fleet made its first major discovery. Scout ships launched from Nomad's Hope detected not just habitable planets but evidence of ancient civilizations. 3 different extinct species had once thrived in this region of space, leaving behind ruins, artifacts, and technology. Xenoarchaeologist Yoonji couldn't believe what her team was finding. An entire section of the galaxy rich with history and mystery, completely untouched by Council expansion. She walked through the ruins of an alien city on a planet they had named New Hope. Running her hands over walls carved with symbols no human had seen before. "Why didn't the Council explore this region?" her assistant asked. Yoonji shook her head. Maybe they did and found nothing they wanted. Or maybe they're afraid of what they might discover. Species that challenged their supremacy in the past. Technology they couldn't control. The Council likes order and predictability. This is neither. The discoveries changed everything. Humanity wasn't just fleeing into empty space. They were entering a region of the galaxy with its own history, its own secrets, its own potential. The Ark Fleet's mission evolved from simple survival to exploration and archaeology. They were uncovering the past while building the future. Captain Sung Ho, now older and graying at the temples, stood before the assembled crew in Nomad's Hope's main gathering hall. 50,000 people filled the vast space, from newborn children to elderly colonists who had risked everything for this journey. We left Earth believing we would have to build our civilization from nothing, he told them. But we found something better. We found a region rich with the dreams of species that came before us. Their cities may be empty, but their legacy remains. We will study it, learn from it, and add our own chapter to the story of this part of the galaxy. The crowd erupted in applause. These people, who had given up safety for freedom, were discovering that the risk had been worth it. Back in what was once Council space, the political landscape had completely transformed. The Council still existed, but it was now just one alliance among many. The Talari formed their own confederation based on mutual cooperation, rather than centralized control. The Vornesh established trade networks that included dozens of former Council species. New alliances formed based on shared values rather than geographic proximity. Ambassador Vriltok, retired from diplomatic service, spent his final years writing a memoir about the human crisis. His book became required reading for anyone studying galactic politics. The last chapter was titled, "What We Got Wrong About Humans." In it, he wrote, "We assumed humanity's desire for freedom was negotiable. We believed that every species, when confronted with the power and prosperity of the Council, would see the logic in membership. We were wrong. Humans showed us that some species value the right to determine their own path more than they value safety, prosperity, or even survival. They taught us that freedom is not something you can grant from a position of power. It is something that exists inherently and can only be respected or violated. We chose violation, and we paid the price." 200 years after the Exodus, the first permanent human settlement beyond the galactic rim was established. New Busan was built on a planet with blue skies and green forests that reminded colonists of Earth. The city grew quickly, becoming a hub of innovation and culture. Universities were established. Research facilities pushed the boundaries of science. Artists created works inspired by both human heritage and alien archaeology. The human diaspora now included 73 colony worlds, all independent but connected through trade and shared culture. They had no central government, no unified military, no empire, just a network of free communities choosing to cooperate because it made sense, not because anyone forced them to. Back on Earth, now an elder statesman, Chancellor Dae-ho prepared a final message. He was 93 years old and knew his time was ending. He had lived to see humanity not just survive their choice for freedom, but thrive because of it. The message was sealed and programmed to be broadcast. Back toward Council space in 100 years, he sat before a camera for the last time and spoke directly to whatever the galaxy might look like in a century. When the Galactic Council came to us with their offer, we faced a choice that seemed impossible: accept their terms and gain instant access to advanced technology, trade networks, and protection, or refuse and risk isolation, conflict, and the unknown. We chose the unknown. He paused, gathering his thoughts. We didn't reject negotiation because we wanted conflict. We rejected it because the terms denied our fundamental right to determine our own destiny. Some species might find security and prosperity worth more than freedom. That's their choice to make. But for humanity, nothing is worth surrendering the right to choose our own path. We chose the hard path, the uncertain path, because we would rather risk extinction as free beings than accept comfortable servitude. To those species watching this message in the future, to those who understand what we did and why, the door remains open. Come find us beyond the rim. Build with us. Explore with us. Not as members of some empire or subjects of some council, but as free people choosing to work together. To those who don't understand, who think we were foolish to give up the council's offer, I have only this to say: we were never truly compatible neighbors anyway, and that's okay. The galaxy is big enough for many different approaches to civilization. We simply chose ours, the message ended. Chancellor Deho died 3 days later, having seen his people safe and free. 400 years after the Exodus, human-descended civilizations numbered in the hundreds. Some remained recognizably human. Others had adapted to their new worlds in ways that made them almost alien. All of them carried forward the core principle that had driven their ancestors to leave known space: the right to choose. The old Galactic Council had transformed into something new. A loose confederation of truly independent species who cooperated because it benefited everyone, not because they were forced to. The Council's attempt to control humanity had inadvertently freed hundreds of other species and created a galaxy more diverse, more dynamic, and more free than it had been in 12,000 years. And out beyond the rim, in the darkness between galaxies, the great-grandchildren of the original Ark fleet prepared new ships for another journey. This time they would push even further into the unknown, not because they had to, but because exploration, discovery, and the freedom to choose their own path was what being human meant. The legacy of those who said no to the most powerful government in the galaxy lived on. Not in monuments or museums, but in the simple fact that their descendants still had the freedom to chart their own course through the stars.